make it more difficult. Inflation is continuing to rage, and interest rates are far too high. I've been disappointed to see the Biden administration's attempt to block the reforms of the American people and that they voted for. We had a landslide election. We won every swing state. We won the popular vote by millions and millions of people.
Southern states continue to take in new residents. Chris Woodward has more.
The findings come from U-Haul, which ranks states by their net gain or loss of one-way movers. Tennessee was 5th last year, Florida was 4th, North Carolina 3rd, Texas 2nd, and South Carolina number 1, climbing 3 spots from the previous year. Economist Jonathan Williams of the American Legislative Exchange Council was not surprised.
It comes down to what states create a climate where there's better economic opportunity for those to make their lives and their families' lives better off. It can be as simple as that. And the states that have lower taxes and more common sense regulation on businesses and are creating the new jobs out there are the ones that are magnets for new individuals moving in.
The bottom states were Pennsylvania, New York, New Jersey, Massachusetts, and California. I'm Chris Woodward.
Parents and pastors are getting credit for forcing a Texas school district to reverse its decision to ban the Bible from its library. Bob Kellogg has more.
Canyon Independent School District Superintendent Darrell Flushy retracted the school's policy banning the Bible. Mary Elizabeth Castle of Texas Values says the ban comes as no surprise, especially when you have leftist members in the Texas House.
Trying to claim that the Bible is just as bad as some of the horrific pornographic books that they're trying to promote. This is basically retaliation because they actually don't want to comply with the law that says you can't put pornographic, inappropriate books in the school library.
Castle says State Senator Jared Patterson's bill banning sexually explicit books from school libraries did not include the Bible.
The Bible is protected under the First Amendment, and that even Texas law allows for the Bible to be taught in public schools. It wouldn't necessarily violate HB 900 to ban the Bible, but that definitely was not the intent of that bill.
After a bellicose board meeting attended by angry parents and pastors, the Bible was reinstated. I'm Bob Kellogg.
The Texas Supreme Court hears arguments over whether a class action suit against Texas utility companies can go forward. Jeff Manasso reports.
Thousands of people filed lawsuits against Texas power transmission companies after a 2021 Texas winter storm that crippled the state's power grid and resulted in dozens of deaths and property damage. The High Court's hearing set for next month in Austin after an appeals court green-lighted certain claims of gross negligence and whether power transmission companies like Oncor in North Texas could have acted differently when state regulators told utilities to cut power to lessen the strain of the state's grid. The court's decision could take months. Jeff Manasso, Fox News.
Former President Jimmy Carter will travel to Washington, D.C. after lying in repose for 3 days in Georgia. Upon arrival, Carter will lie in state at the U.S. Capitol Rotunda ahead of his national funeral service on Thursday. More from Steve Harrigan.
For 3 days, the body has lied in repose here, and tens of thousands of people from Georgia, from across the country, have come here to pay their respects to the 39th president. Carter's family said they are moved by the outpouring of affection and emotion for Jimmy Carter. Carter's remains and his family will head to Dobbins Air Base. They'll then be flown to Washington, part of the week-long memorial, the highlight of which will be the state funeral on Thursday.
More news available online at afn.net and download the AFN mobile app for your Apple or Android device. I'm Rusty Pugh.
Thoughts of the child you were carrying keep pouring over in your mind. A deep, unrelenting sadness overshadows your days, and you wonder if you will ever feel whole again. There is hope and healing from a reproductive loss. Call the International Helpline, 866-482-LIFE, and talk with someone who has been where you are. Your call is confidential, and we will help you find healing. 866-482-LIFE.
We inform.
Religious freedom is about people of faith being able to live out their faith, live out their convictions, no matter where they are.
We equip.
Sacred honor is the courage to speak truth,
to live out your free speech.
We also rejoice in our sufferings because we know that suffering produces perseverance, perseverance, character, and character, hope.
This is At the Core on American Family Radio.
Welcome to At the Core with Walker Wildmon and Rick Green. I'm Rick Green, America's Constitution Coach. Thanks for joining me on this Tuesday, getting into 2025, already 1 week in, and lots of great things going on. I mean, great things, too. You know, I'm usually starting the program by saying, man, there's a lot of crazy stuff going on. The absurdity is insane. As my pastor, Jimmy Pruitt, likes to say, the theater of the absurd, and that's typically what we have to report on. So we definitely got some of that. I mean, Joe Biden's not done doing everything he can to destroy the country, and so he's getting his last few shots in these final weeks. I say him. We all know it's weekend at Bernie's routine, and somebody else is calling the shots and pushing the buttons, and just sending him out there to sign the unconstitutional executive orders, for instance, on the no drilling thing. But despite that, there's a lot of good, man. I mean, a lot of good. So I got a problem here as the host. I got to decide, do I spend all my time on the good, on the bad, the ugly, or do I just give you a little bit of all three? I think we'll go with maybe a little bit of the bad and the ugly and a lot more of the good. I'm an optimist. I like to know the good. I'm a bit of a realist sometimes too, which means I want to know what the bad and the ugly is because I want to be prepared for the worst. But I don't know. I like to walk around with a little joy, a little pep in my step. I like to, accentuate the positive. I will not sing, or producer extraordinaire Bobby will cut me off and shut off the airways very quickly and go to a replay or something else other than me singing in order to save all of our stations and friends from that pain. At any rate, we'll accentuate the positive and talk about a lot of the good stuff that's going on. Clearly, much of that is a result of the re-election of Donald Trump back into the White House after 4 years hiatus in the wilderness, 4 years with experiences of burning bushes everywhere he turned. And I believe that means he is coming back in 2 weeks from, is it today or yesterday? Whatever the 20th is, 2 weeks from yesterday, I guess. A different man. A man on fire. Very much like a Moses instead of 40 years in the wilderness. Those 4 years were enough. Very much a man that understands what we're up against. And had he been reelected in 2020, actually he was reelected, had he been sworn in again and served another 4 years at that time, wouldn't have been the same. Wouldn't have been anywhere close what I think we're about to experience. In fact, it would have been, good, decent, but mixed bag, and certainly not what we're about to see, which is a man on fire, not just a man experiencing the burning bushes, but a man that's caught on fire himself and obviously willing to make the appointments that are necessary for real change, for a real cleaning of the house. The kind of people that you bring in who understand what it means to have the boot of government on their neck. There's something different about an individual who has suffered the injustice of a government out of control. That person gets it more than anyone else. That person gets it more than anyone that's just read about it, that's been, hey, you can go watch the movie Braveheart, and you can go watch The Patriot. You can watch these movies and the injustice that you see. Rob Roy would be another good example. You watch those things, and you can get upset, and you can be moved emotionally, and you can think, I want to be on the right side of the fight. It's a totally different thing if you've actually been in that fight and felt the drowning, just black hole of the weight of the government coming after you, knowing that you do not have the resources to fight back like you need to be able to, and knowing that these are impossible odds and that only God can save you from that. That person that's been through that fire and has experienced that boot of government on their neck, that's a warrior that you want on the front lines. And not only has Donald Trump been through that for the last 8 years, because even during his presidency, they were obviously doing it to him, but certainly through the last 4 years when he didn't have the power of the presidency to fight back, and he had to give up significant chunks of his fortune to fight back, have significant chunks of his fortune stolen from him by an out-of-control, corrupt government in New York. When you go through those things, it changes you. When you have assassination attempts against you, it changes you. So I believe we're in for an amazing 4 years. I should say even 2 years, because we don't know how much momentum will be lost, and when the focus becomes the next election, which will happen as soon as, honestly, February, March, April, May of next year. So really one solid year of total focus on the agenda, and then another year of being able to hold the members of Congress and those that 1/3 of the Senate that will be up for reelection in 2026, hold their feet to the fire if they want to be reelected. And then who knows at the end of that 2 years, if the Republicans hold on to the House or not, that will have a lot to do with how much of the Trump agenda gets done. So all of that opening without taking a breath nearly to say that on the good side of things, I think we have a different man coming into the White House than we've seen in my lifetime. This is a different Donald Trump than what we saw for those 4 years. This is a man that will be even more effective than Ronald Reagan was because of having the boot of government on his neck, because of having all of those things. And, I say this as someone who had just a small taste of that. I mean, a very small taste compared to what Donald Trump has been through, a very small taste of that compared to, friends of mine that have been put through, absolute every evil you can imagine for the last 4 years as J6ers, and others who have been absolutely persecuted by this DOJ, even though they weren't at January 6th at the Capitol or any of that, but because they were conservative, supported Trump, supported others, went against the medical industrial complex, their lives have been completely turned upside down as well. And so those kinds of people, I think we're in for a season where it's those people that come back and run for office or become, speakers and heads of organizations and become champions for liberty and freedom in a way that you just, I don't know, it's hard to do that effectively if you haven't been on the receiving end of injustice. And I say all of that lead up, so first 10 minutes of the program today, all of that to say truth, justice, and the American way is about to be on the comeback. We're about to restore so many of those things, and it's going to be brick by brick. This is not going to be, suddenly when Donald Trump is sworn in at noon on January 20th, the skies are going to part and it's going to suddenly be perfect and everything's going to be done. No, it's going to be brick by brick. It's going to be scratching and clawing. It's going to be inch by inch as we take ground back. So be prepared for that as we go into 2025, but be joyful, man. Be thankful. Let's have a heart of gratitude today for what we've been given. I don't know about you, yesterday watching, I'm sorry, I have to chuckle a little bit, but watching Kamala Harris have to, be a statesman and read the results and announce to the world that Donald J. Trump was duly certified as the president of the United States. I enjoyed that. I don't know about you. I enjoyed that. That was a sweet, sweet moment. And the fact that it was not a long, drawn-out fight, the fact that we didn't have, just think of all the scenarios that could have happened. We could have had another super, super close race, razor thin, where one state electoral vote changing could change the outcome, and therefore a concentrated battle for every ballot in that state, or even trying to influence the electors to potentially change their votes, to potentially no one getting a majority of the Electoral College and it going to the House, and therefore you have a protracted fight. And there's just so many things that absolutely could have happened, that have happened in our history in the United States, could have happened in this race for sure, and didn't. So I just think, just pausing for a moment, having a heart of gratitude after watching January 6th yesterday be so smooth and so quick, and only because it was an absolute landslide, only because God gave us grace, not because Kamala Harris was being magnanimous or because the Democrats didn't, chose not to put up a fight. None of that. That was not why. It was because it was such a landslide. There was no path for them to reverse it. There was zero chance of them being able to get any different outcome. There was no question that Donald Trump won the election, hands down, by a large margin, and there were not the same accusations of cheating and manipulation. Why? Because we were on the ground in all those key areas, because you had people like Tony Shoup in Pennsylvania leading Audit the Vote, one of our Constitution coaches and Patriot Academy's Constitution coaches in Pennsylvania that just did an amazing job of preventing the steal from happening in 2024. Because people like Chad Conley and David Barton and Faith Wins went around all over the country. Thank you, Joan Lindsay, and all of those that were a part of that, and training churches and citizens to be boots on the ground and be poll watchers and prevent the steal from happening in places like Virginia and other areas of the country. Because of all of that hard work that went in, week after week, month after month, literally years of effort, so that the victory would be an absolute landslide. Because of that, we had a very smooth day yesterday, and all of the chaos and nightmare scenarios that could have repeated themselves and the craziness that could have happened yesterday on January 6th as the electoral votes were counted in Congress, none of that happened. And it was because of you, the listeners here at American Family Radio, the hard work that you put in, the voice that you allowed to be heard in your churches, in your communities, in your families, because of the social media posts that you made, because of the donations that you made here to American Family Radio, the donations you made to Patriot Academy, to Wall Builders, to Faith Wins, to all of these organizations that were out there doing the hard work. Because of all of that, January 6th, yesterday, was uneventful, and as it should be. Doesn't mean it'll always be that way. We may have a knockdown, drag out 4 years from now. And I want to be clear. It doesn't mean that it would be wrong to have a very contentious January 6th. There's nothing wrong with questioning the election. Let's be very clear. There is nothing wrong with demanding accountability to make sure that ballots were counted correctly, that electoral votes have been cast for the right candidate based on what the vote actually was, and whether or not it was constitutional. Those are all absolutely legitimate questions. If Democrats had questioned that yesterday, I would have absolutely supported that. If a Democrat wanted to have an investigation into a particular state because they had evidence that there were, Constitution was ignored and governors changed election law at the last minute, or some Secretary of State gave an advantage to one party over the other, if they had that like we did in 2020, I would have 100% supported their right to ask for an investigation and just make sure we got it right. I think we should all want that. We should all want some sort, not guarantee, but we should all want certainty. That's what the word I'm looking for, certainty in the outcome of the elections. We should all want to make sure that we can walk away from that election and say, hey, you won. I don't like the fact that you won, but you won, and God bless you. Have a great term. I'm going to run against you next time. I mean, that's the way we should be able to end our elections, and you cannot do that if you don't have some certainty that we counted all the right ballots, that only legal people voted, that there was a prevention of any manipulation of the system. And we did better on that in 2024, and Lord willing, we'll do better on that in 2028. Actually 2026. And I think we will, because I think there's beginning to be a restoration of sanity, not just a restoration of biblical principles and the Constitution and all of those things, just a restoration of sanity. People are starting to get back to a place where they're willing to have a conversation. They're willing to have civil discourse, which means they're willing to be rational and sane and try to find the right solutions. And that includes in our elections. So I think future January 6s will be more informed. I think the more people we put through our Constitution classes, they'll understand how the Electoral College works. They'll understand why the day of counting the electoral ballots is important and how it works, and why it's okay to object and ask questions. And to be honest, I'm going to be pushing for a constitutional amendment to the 12th Amendment to make it very clear how to handle those objections and those questions, so it's not chaotic like it was in 2020. And I think once we get removed from this presidential election, we'll be able to do that. So lots of good stuff happening, folks. Be encouraged, be grateful, and then be motivated to stay in the fight. We'll talk a little bit more about that when we come back. We'll probably get to some phone calls. We'll talk about some headlines. We got a lot to cover. I'm Rick Green, America's Constitution Coach. You're listening to At the Core.
So the chief priests made plans to put Lazarus to death as well. My name is Abraham Hamilton III, and this is the Hamilton Minute. After Jesus resurrected Lazarus, his and Lazarus' fame spread. They already planned to kill Jesus, but now, because Lazarus was tangible evidence of Jesus' resurrection power, the chief priests and Pharisees plotted to kill Lazarus too. They never worried about Lazarus before, but now, because he is a walking billboard of Christ's power, they want him dead too. This, brothers and sisters, is why many come against you. It isn't personal, but satanic forces can't stand your representation of God's power to transform lives. That's why we rejoice when we're slandered for his name's sake. Christ's power is on display.
Listen each weekday from 5 to 6 p.m. Central for the Hamilton Corner with Abraham Hamilton III, Public Policy Analyst for the American Family Association.
Hey friends of 8 Days of Hope, this is Hannah Fletcher, your Communications Director. I wanted to say thank you so much for listening to Hope Reigns, a broadcast of 8 Days of Hope. Since 2005, we have existed to love and serve those in need in the face of natural and human disasters. We accomplish this mission through our rebuilding, rapid response, safe house, and mass feeding ministries. It's such a privilege to hear how God moves each and every week through our volunteers and leaders as they strive to provide both physical and spiritual healing to the brokenhearted. Today, we are grateful to have mobilized almost 60,000 volunteers from across the United States to love and serve over 10,000 families, to provide 45,000 meals, and to build 15 homes of refuge and freedom for survivors of trafficking. How great is our God? We thank you so much for your continued support of this ministry and the work that God calls us to. To learn more and get involved with our efforts, visit 8daysofhope.com. That's 8daysofhope.com.
Hello, everyone. Tim Wildmon here with American Family Association and American Family Radio. Hey, our tours for 2025, our spiritual heritage tours of Washington, D.C. and Williamsburg and Boston, they're filling up. They're halfway full now. And we've never had a response quite like this. So what I'm saying is if you want to go with us this year to either Colonial Williamsburg, which includes Jamestown and Yorktown, or Washington, D.C. and all the sites of our nation's capital, including Mount Vernon, or if you want to go with us to Boston and see the Freedom Trail and all the sites of the greater Boston area. If you want to go on these trips with us this year, it's time to check into the information and register so that you make sure you're on one of our tours, the one you want to go on, obviously. So go to the website wildmongroup.com, WILDMON group.com. Hope to see you on one of these in 2025.
This is At the Core on American Family Radio with your host, Rick Green.
Welcome back to At the Core with Walker Wildmon and Rick Green. I'm Rick Green, America's Constitution Coach. Thanks for staying with me today. As I was saying earlier, good, the bad, and the ugly, a lot more good than bad and ugly, but you can bet there's going to be a little bit more bad and ugly over the next 2 weeks, maybe a lot. There could be some chaos. I wouldn't be surprised if there's more terrorist attacks across the country. I'm not a doomsdayer or don't consider myself a conspiracy theorist at all, but listen, there's just facts, right? There's reality. There's evil in the world, and a lot of that evil came across our borders over the last 4 years, and a lot of that evil was homegrown in our country because of the Marxist education system teaching our own children to hate their own nation, and there's obviously going to be negative results from that kind of poison being poured into the culture. So you're going to get some of that, and we've seen some of that, and of course the crime and chaos in the streets as a result of the absurd Democrat policies that reward crime instead of punishing it. So I think the table's set where that chaos can be created if they so choose to do so. I think it's one of the reasons the left has been kind of quiet, it feels like they have laid down too easily with the Trump victory, and so many things around the world correcting themselves with this one change in leadership. And so it does make me wonder if they're playing a little possum, and there won't be some craziness. I do not believe, partly because I don't live in a spirit of fear, but of power, love, and a sound mind. But I do not believe that they'll be able to create enough chaos to derail what's coming on January 20th. Justice is coming. And I don't think they can stop it. I do think they'll try, and so I expect there to be some more chaos in cities across the country. I expect, perhaps some attempts to disrupt on January 20th. I was let's say, concerned with Dan Bongino's comments yesterday. This is a guy that's a former Secret Service himself, very plugged in, obviously very good intel and connections to be able to speak to a lot of what's going on. And he reported yesterday that the Secret Service is not ready for January 20th. And, I mean, we know that Secret Service, just like the FBI and CIA and pretty much every federal department, has been stricken with the DEI disease and therefore is weaker and not as effective an organization. I mean, we know the stories, and we fully recognize what happens when you are distracted by those absurd racist policies that try to elevate people based on their sex organs and the color of their skin. Incredibly evil idea that the left has championed over the last couple of decades, and it came to fruition in the Biden administration, and so it weakened all of these agencies that are typically, as a law enforcement agency, 100% focused on results. Can you stop the threat? Can you investigate well? Can you get the job done and protect the asset, protect the whatever person you've been assigned to? That's what it used to be with these agencies, and unfortunately, that's been completely watered down. And so you've got a lot of inept agents. You've got a lot of very bad policies that create danger, and it's going to take time to root that out. And I don't even think the beginning of that will happen until after January 20th. So Bongino's point was this agency is not ready to protect the President of the United States, who is maybe the most, I think I said this back when the assassination attempts happened this summer, probably the most targeted individual in history as far as people wanting to assassinate him and go after him. And so praying for the covering that only the Lord can provide is vitally important. I think he's clearly got that. I think God is no doubt protecting this man. Some of you may think that's going too far or reading too much between the lines, or however you want to say that. I don't. I thought that before the first assassination attempt. I would hear other people say, Donald Trump's God's anointed and Donald Trump's protected by God, and I would think. I would think maybe, this guy's clearly been through a lot and has some sort of, there's some sort of supernatural, at the time I thought maybe not protection, but energy and just like a discernment. I remember when he came in his first term and immediately said, why aren't we giving, $150 million to the Palestinian Authority that's using that money to turn around and kill Jews? That's stupid. Why aren't we funding that? Well, why did previous presidents not understand that and see that? So he just had a discernment that I thought, that's supernatural. That's a God-given gift. That's something that God's giving to this guy. Whether I didn't even know at the time whether or not he's a Christian, but God moves through people that are not Christians all the time. Nebuchadnezzar, and we could give so many examples in the Old Testament. And so I thought that in his first term, there's something here that God's moving through him. But I didn't go so far as to say this is God's anointed or that he's got a protection from God that's supernatural. I changed that tune, believe me. Whenever I watched that video that afternoon, whenever he turned his head just in time and, got shot in the ear and not in the brain where the bullet would have hit him. And, all I could think immediately was the, 1755, the Battle of the Monongahela, George Washington, 23 years old, riding up and down for 3 hours, leading the retreat of the British troops that he was there with and his Virginia regulars, while the French and Indians just mowed them down from the wilderness. They said it was like ghosts shooting at them, and every other officer, 80-something of them, shot down. He's the only guy, only officer that they're not able to take out. 2 horses shot out from under him, 4 bullet holes in his jacket, bullet fragments in his hair. He wrote home to his brother and said, the bullets were whizzing past my ear, and it sounded like music to me. I'm like, okay, people are dying all around you. You got bullets flying past you, and you can hear them, and it's music. It's music. That's a God thing, man. That's an anointing to be. Let's see, what is it? Psalms 144 about he teaches my fingers to fight. I can't remember the whole thing, but Barry Pepper does it really well in Saving Private Ryan when he's up there in the top of that tower and shooting, and he's quoting that Bible verse as he's sniper. Anyway, I can't remember the verse exactly, but that's what I thought of when I learned that story of George Washington. You have to be. That's a God-given gift to be a warrior and to stand against evil. And then when it happened to Donald Trump and he got up and said, fight, 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 instantly I thought, this guy is God's anointed. This guy does have a supernatural protection, and he's going to take that into the Oval Office. And so even as there is likely some chaos in the next couple of weeks, even as there is no doubt going to be attempts to stop this man from being able to dismantle the deep state, I do believe God's protecting him. But I would implore you to pray significantly between now and not just to the inauguration, but through the inauguration and throughout this. We're commanded to do that. That's biblical anyway, to pray for our leaders. But specifically pray for his safety. Pray that the plans of the enemy are thwarted. Pray that there's more moments like yesterday that was, my friend Lance Wallnall said it last night on Flashpoint, it was a Mordecai moment where Kamala Harris had to announce the election results, and it was very much like Haman having to lead him through the streets, on the king's horse or donkey or whatever it was. I mean, that's what yesterday was the person that called him every name in the book, the people that said he was a threat to our way of life, to quote-unquote democracy, which we should be a threat to democracy because we're a constitutional republic, not a democracy. But anyway, all of these evil things about this guy, and then they had to basically parade him through the streets and talk about how great he was. So really cool, really cool. We'll see how much of that happens in the next 2 weeks. I'm kind of amazed, honestly, at the international Mordecai moments. These world leaders that had said similar things or acted that way towards Donald Trump that are now falling all over themselves to fawn over him and get back in his good graces. So that's just fun to watch, isn't it? I'm certainly enjoying it. Okay, quick announcement. We've got an early bird special for the Activate Summit 2025, and it's been extended just a few days. You don't have long. January 10th. You got to get registered before January 10th to get the early bird special. It's 20% off the total purchase. So here's the code. I'm going to give it to you a couple times here. Early Bird 20. That's easy to remember, right? You get 20% off. It's the early bird special. Early Bird 20. The conference is June 12th through the 14th. It's called Biblical Bedrock, Building on the Authority of Scripture. Conference designed to equip Christians of all ages to stand firm on the truth of God's Word in a world where feelings and living experiences often take precedence over Scripture. Now, even as I say that, that's exactly the problem we've been facing. Everybody follows their feelings and their lived experiences instead of the truth, instead of the actual foundational bedrock principles that God gives us in His Word. So how do you combat that? How do you build on the authority of Scripture? Well, come spend 3 days with us and get that biblical bedrock. It's going to be for 13 and up. You're going to hear from Ed Vitagliano. He's our vice president here at American Family. You're going to get some Abe Hamilton. Yeah, that's worth it right there just to get some teaching from Abe. Todd Herman, host of A Disciple's View. Frank Turek, who is an incredible apologist. I love this guy. He's been to Patriot Academy many times and had him on our program a lot. I love Frank. You're going to love that. Crossexamine.org, by the way, if you want to just get some daily doses of how to defend the faith, how to be ready to answer. And then, of course, Dr. Alex McFarland, co-host of Exploring the Word. So you got a stellar lineup here, and that's for the 13 and up, and just going to be phenomenal. You get very well equipped. You want to enjoy all of that. Then for 6 through 12, so you can do the Activate Kids track, there's going to be a lot of cool hands-on activities, games, and lessons. It's going to be awesome. Great opportunity for them to learn as well. So they're going to memorize some scripture. They're going to do some cool games, lots of fun stuff. 3 days, amazing experience. Biblical Bedrock, building on the authority of Scripture. Early Bird 20, that's your code to get the discount, Early Bird 20. And you know what I'm missing? I think you're just going to go to our website. Bobby, tell me if I'm getting that right. I think that's right. But you can certainly go to American Family Radio and learn more.
It is. Just go to afa.net.
Oh,
and,
easy.
It should come right up on the
AFA.net.
flash page, the splash
Thank you, Bobby. Appreciate that. AFA.net. That's all you got to do. And then look for Biblical Bedrock, building on the authority of Scripture. One of the reasons I think it's important to do these things is because we need the fellowship to know we're not alone, and we need the foundational strength that we can take back to our community. So when you come to a conference like this, you're not just going to sit and get lectured to all day. You're going to be interacting with other people. You're going to realize, wow, there are other patriots that are biblical, that want to learn these things and live these things out. It's vital. It's vital. I think it's important to do. It's why Patriot Academy does our leadership congresses all over the country and built our campus so people can come in and get that fellowship. But this is going to be a special deal. You got to check this out at the website today, afa.net. And early bird 20. Don't forget that. 20%. So that's a significant chunk. You don't want to miss that opportunity, and that's over in just a few days. What's today? The 7th. It ends on the 10th. And so this is your last chance. Go check it out today and get signed up. Okay, so we've got good, the bad, and the ugly. I was talking about the president coming in, talking about the fact that it's going to be a little crazy over the next 2 weeks. And then one thing I wanted to address a little bit today is how quickly things could begin to change. Some of it's already changing, even before he takes office. I mean, until the absurd unconstitutional executive order yesterday on not drilling, and then of course the Medal of Shame ceremony last week, where Joe Biden's handing out medals like they're candy to people that I like Denzel Washington. Okay, that one was maybe one good one that he did that day, but George Soros, I mean, come on. Yeah. Anyway, before those two things happened, everybody's kind of wondering, hey, is Biden still around? What's going on? Who's president right now? So it's kind of been easy for Donald Trump to fill that gap, right? And Mar-a-Lago has become the White House, essentially, and world leaders and people from all over coming there to meet with Donald Trump. So I think it's going to be a kind of a different animal than we've seen in quite a few years in terms of hitting the ground running on January 20th. I bet the guy's going to have a stack of executive orders to issue immediately. I am praying there are a lot of pardons for J6ers. I used to say blanket pardon. I'm not sure about that now. I think I think it might be wise for, and I'm only saying this because one of my favorite J6 defendants, the praying grandma, Rebecca Lavrance, which I'm going to share this interview with y'all maybe Thursday, maybe next week, we'll see. But I had a chance to visit with her last night, and I recorded the interview. And you know what's crazy? I had to do this interview with her where she couldn't be on video or on internet. We couldn't record on my normal recording software and all that. She's not allowed to be on the internet. Can you believe that? Can you believe that a federal judge would say to a 72-year-old woman, this is not a pedophile that you're trying to keep from this is a woman that simply exercised her free speech and her freedom of religion and her right for petition her government for redress of grievances and to assemble and all of those things. And this judge in Washington, D.C., part of the cabal there that needs to be dismantled in order to get justice back into our system, part of her sentencing, not only did she get found guilty and then sentenced to a year of house arrest, she can't get on the internet. So we had to do the interview with her just calling. And so we do have the audio, and I'll share that with you either Thursday or next Tuesday. But here's what she said. I was like, hey, Rebecca, January 6th, and then Donald Trump's coming in January 20th. You're going to get pardoned most likely. I mean, surely you're at the top of the list. And she says to me, no, I'm going to refuse the pardon. I'm like, what? You're going to refuse the pardon? What are you talking about? And I didn't even think about it. She said, Rick, if I accept the pardon, I'll lose my appeal. And what we want here is justice. And we want to make sure that future patriots aren't subjected to the same thing, and therefore we need to see this through and get some legal precedent on the right side of things. I'm telling you, I was in tears when she said that because I realized what a patriot she is. I realized the sacrifice she's willing to make to stay in this hellacious fight that she's in order to make sure that future patriots don't suffer the same pain that she has. Isn't that amazing? I mean, come on, folks. I already said we got to be having heart of gratitude for having an easy January 6th yesterday and smooth process and all of that. Let's be grateful for the patriots that are paving the way for our kids and grandkids, paving the way for us. Amazing. All right, by the way, the website is actually activate.afa.net/summit. All right, I know that's a lot. Activate.afa.net/summit. It's in the podcast notes, so you can see it this afternoon and get registered and get that 20% discount. All right, we'll hopefully see you there, and you'll have a great 3 days interacting with other patriots from across the nation. I'm Rick Green, America's Constitution Coach. You're listening to At the Core. We'll be back in just a few.
what we believe about the Bible is based on what we believe about its source.
The God Who Speaks, the award-winning documentary from the American Family Association, is now available in a special limited edition DVD set. This release includes a Sunday school curriculum and 2 hours of additional footage. Go to thegodwhospeaks.org to get your copy today. thegodwhospeaks.org.
The American Family Association's mission is to inform, equip, and activate individuals to strengthen the moral foundations of our culture. We also support the church. Our goal is to be a leading organization in biblical worldview training for cultural transformation. We believe true morality flows from biblical principles and directs people to the manner in which God intends them to live.
Thank you for standing with the American Family Association as we seek to stop the erosion of godly values.
80% of the time, an abortion-minded mother who views an ultrasound or sonogram of her baby will choose life. Here's the story of Candace.
The sonogram sealed the deal for me. My baby was like this tiny little spectrum of hope. And I saw his heart beating on the screen. And knowing that there's life growing inside, that sonogram changed my life. I went from just Candace to mom. Thank you to everybody that has given these gifts. You guys are giving more than money. You guys are giving love.
There are currently preborn centers which do not have an ultrasound machine. Would you sponsor a machine today? Dial pound 250 and say keyword baby. That's pound 250 and say baby. Or go to preborn.com. That's preborn.com. Your love could save a life.
Think of parenting teens like traveling down a tunnel through a mountain. There's light at either end, but in the middle, it often gets very, very dark. Hi, I'm Mark Gregston with Parenting Today's Teens. The teenage years often bring a season of struggle. Moms and dads feel like they've lost the lovable little girl they used to know, and when you're in the tunnel, the outcome is unclear. You wonder, will your son or daughter emerge as responsible adults? Hey, if you're in the teen years, sometimes you feel lost in the darkness. In this season of hard work, tension, and exhaustion, remember, it's worth every minute. There's light at the end of the tunnel, my friend. And when you reach the other side, you'll thank God for His faithful hand, even when you couldn't see His plan.
Looking for more parenting wisdom? Go online to parentingtodaysteens.org or search for Parenting Today's Teens in your favorite app store.
This is At the Core on American Family Radio with your host, Rick Green.
Welcome back to At the Core with Walker Wildmon and Rick Green. I'm Rick Green, America's Constitution Coach. Thanks for staying with me today, talking about the good, the bad, and the ugly, talking about kind of the potential craziness that might happen in the next couple of weeks as we get ready for a Trump administration that is better prepared, as I was saying, than maybe any that we've seen. The executive orders, the team, the Congress ready to approve his nominations. All of this I think is gonna move pretty quickly. Speaking to a couple of the things that have happened in the last few days that will allow it to move quickly. Last week, of course, the speaker reelected on Friday. A lot of consternation about that among many of our conservative friends. I have been pretty clear with regard to Mike Johnson that first of all, that I think he's a great guy and a godly man and somebody that's biblically based, constitutionally sound, all of those things. But I've also been a vocal critic whenever the strategy seemed off because I am an equal opportunity critic. I don't pull the punches, no matter they're Republican, Democrat, friend, or foe, whatever. I'm just going to call it like I see it. And, of course, the funding for Ukraine that he pushed through and the ridiculous 1,500-page bill at the last minute last month, those kind of things deserve criticism. And so the reelection of him as speaker was a little bit in question, not a lot, but there was a potential that it could be, like what happened to Kevin McCarthy or potentially, maybe not actually lose in the end, but have to go through many, many votes and whatever. Anyway, it came down to just a couple of holdouts, and those were changed during the vote, actually. So he actually ended up winning re-election on the first vote. And those guys got a phone call from Donald Trump. I would love to hear, just a recording of that call. But at any rate, Speaker Johnson reelected. And that's with you only had one vote to give up. This is a the narrowest of margins in the House. And so I just want to say this about Mike. He's got an impossible job. I know I've said that on the air before. I'm not making excuses for him, but it is impossible. There is no way with a one-vote majority that you're going to be able to run the House and get everything you want and get everything that we want as conservatives, especially when you recognize that of the Republican caucus, you probably only have about 20% that you could actually call really strong conservatives, if that. And so not only is that then a even smaller percentage of the total 435 members in the House, but that means that he has to keep from losing one vote, or I guess two. He can only lose 2 votes out of the entire Republican caucus. So everybody clamors to get what they want. And don't forget, we're talking about politicians here. So you're talking about, on average, I don't mean to be cynical, but on average, very narcissistic, self-centered people that care more about themselves than the country. Now, there are patriots in Congress that actually do care more about the country than themselves. They actually do put the country first, but there's only a handful of them. There's not many. And so Mike has to really do an impossible job and talk about herding cats. I mean, it's I don't know, man. It's tough. And so I've every time I've criticized him, I've also said, let's give him grace as well. But, at some point the grace runs out. But let's give him grace and let's recognize the impossible position that he's in. And Ted Cruz said something when all this was going on that I thought was spot on, and that is, look, this is the most conservative speaker of our lifetime, and you're not going to get a more conservative speaker no matter what you do. And the pieces on the board don't change. So if you change the speaker, you still have a one-vote majority, but now you're going to have a speaker that's less conservative, so when the fight really does come down, is not going to push as hard for the conservative principles, is not going to push as hard for the biblical principles. So at the end of the day, it was absolutely the right move to keep Johnson as Speaker. We said that on our Wall Builders program several times last week. And then today on Wall Builders, you can hear an interview with Josh Burkeen, a congressman from Oklahoma, talking about, some of that was going on behind the scenes and why he chose to support Speaker Johnson. And he's a member of the Freedom Caucus and one of the most conservative guys. So I may actually re-air that. I know you can hear the Wall Builders interviews on the weekend here on American Family Radio, but I may re-air that because it's so good. I may re-air that here on At the Core. Anyway, all of that to say, Johnson reelected. I think that's good, and I think it's a different ballgame now that we have the Senate. So he doesn't have to, deal with the trying to keep 218 votes together and then turn around and have a bill that he can get through a, Chuck Schumer, one of the scummiest politicians to ever live, led Senate. Now you're going to have a John Thune-led Senate and 53 Republican votes, which is still not a cakewalk, right? I mean, you still got to find a way to get bills through the Senate without a 60-vote majority. You still got to do, when you can, reconciliation and have a 50-vote majority, but now you can only use, 3 or 4 senators. I mean, it's still going to be dicey, folks. It's not going to be easy. And I think what makes the difference is the tidal wave of support that Donald Trump has. So Trump is, without question, calling the shots, and the reason that Johnson held on is because Trump supported him and put some effort into making sure that he was reelected. So I think there's enough, we'll see, but I think there's enough momentum and the tidal wave coming in that Trump is going to have a very good chance at passing a big chunk of his agenda in those first 100 days. So I expect some real progress, and I think you have to create that momentum, or I guess keep the momentum from the election, but create the legislative momentum and the agency momentum by doing some big things in the first 100 days that allow you to just keep building on that and keep doing big things. I hate to say we should learn from Obama, but we should learn from Obama. That's exactly what he did when he came in. And it was like if you were trying to play defense against the leftist Marxist people that he was putting in office, in these agencies and that he was doing, the agenda that he was doing, it was like whack-a-mole, man. I mean, every day they were pushing on some new front, not in a small way, in big, big ways, to radically, as he said he would, radically transform the nation. And that's why they accomplished so much. It was evil, it was wrong, it was terrible for our country. But if you were on his side, if you were on the leftist Marxist side, it was victory after victory after victory after victory. And we're still, unfortunately, living with the pain of that. So I believe Trump can do the same thing for the right ideas and build on that momentum and make it where the left is playing whack-a-mole. Make it where the Democrats are just doing everything they can to play defense, and they just can't keep up because we're playing offense so aggressively and making big changes, not little bitty changes. If that happens, you're in for the largest shift in American culture that we've seen. I was going to say in our lifetime. It may be the biggest one in history. I mean, this may be the biggest shift in the right direction that America has ever had, because we started off in the right direction. We went the right direction for the first 100 years, maybe you could say 150 years. And really up until, I'd say 150 years, because really up until Woodrow Wilson and the progressives coming in 1913 was a shift year in the wrong direction. Got the income tax amendment 16th, got the changing of election of senators, took it away from the states and gave it directly to the people. That was a big mistake. That's the 17th Amendment. You got the Fed created in 1913. I mean, it was a horrible year. And the culture shifted to this progressive mindset, and the progressives, what we would today call definitely left-wingers, they won a lot, and they moved the nation the wrong direction. Reagan was a big shift back in 1980 or 81, and when he came in, and we saw a lot of good things happen. And actually, Bobby we were talking about this off the air. That there were all these big things that happened even as Reagan's getting sworn in. You released the hostages. You got this patriotism starting to come back because Reagan's campaigning on it, even to the point that like Bobby was saying, the hockey team, America beats U.S. beats Russia, the Soviet Union. So there was all this cool stuff happening, and then Reagan comes in and does the tax cuts of 81, and we end up with the greatest peacetime economic expansion in history, what Robert Bartley of the Wall Street Journal called the 7 Fat Years in his book, a phenomenal book, 7 Fat Years. You got to get it. In fact, in 1994, I did a documentary about the 7 Fat Years, about how Reagan created economic expansion, brought back patriotism. It was a big shift. But Reagan was unable to do anything about the swamp. He did not reduce the size of the bureaucracy at all. In fact, it tripled. And even though revenue doubled, tax revenue doubled because of the tax cuts, the growth of government, it tripled. And that's how you ended up with the deficits in the 80s. So all of that history to say that we've had these significant shifts in history, but I think we have a chance if Trump pushes and if he stays true to the agenda, and if his appointees execute, if his nominees stay true to the agenda, we will see the biggest shift that the country has ever seen. It'll be bigger than what the left was able to do in 1913. It'll be bigger than what Ronald Reagan was able to do in 1980. And it will, Lord willing, restore the republic, restore justice, restore constitutional limitations on government. We're getting, as long as Vivek and Elon are out there talking about the proper role of government, getting rid of agencies, not just saying we're going to run them better and they're going to be more efficient, but actually saying they should not exist at all. Challenging the presupposition that government can save us from ourselves. That's really what they're doing. And if they do that at the federal level, think of what that allows us to do at the local level. I'm on a mission at the local level to challenge the presupposition of the proper role of government and the role of government to save us from ourselves and get government back into its proper role. As an example, government should not have all these land controls at the local level. Why should you have to jump through all of these hoops to build a shed on your own property? Why should you have to jump through all these hoops to build a big house on your own property? Why should you have to ask the government how many houses you can build on your property? I mean, it's absurd what we let government do on the front end of what we do with our own land. Who owns the property? You or the government? So as they're questioning these things at the federal level and saying, get out of the way, let us drill, baby, drill. Get out of the way. Let us pursue the American dream and stop micromanaging the relationships between the employer and the employee, or between the landowner and their own land. If we can get the federal government out of our way, and then you and I can work on getting the local government out of our way, wow, you watch what happens in this country. The economic growth, the freedom, the things that will happen if we just simply get back to first principles, if we get back to biblical principles of liberty, it's going to be amazing. Absolutely amazing. So the opportunity is right here in front of us. It's absolutely phenomenal. And we've got to get ready to dig in and start scratching and clawing to take every inch back. I'm praying that it's not just a revolution in rhetoric only. I'm praying that it's a true freedom revolution where actual freedoms are restored and given back to the American people, that we actually get a lot of these agencies abolished, that we absolutely turn education around, that we freedom lovers and patriotic Americans take that back at the local level, get rid of the federal level. They shouldn't be involved at all on education. And then you and me, man, we go do the hard work. We take over the school boards and the curriculum choices and get rid of all the Marxism and the racism and all the nasty stuff they've done. We can do that. And when we do that, we'll get to see the results. It will bear fruit. It'll bear fruit. Some of these things immediately. Some of them it's going to take a while, and we may not see it till the next generation is raised. Even the economic policy, when you get rid of the regulations and you cut taxes and you do those things, it takes time. You know, Reagan came in with all the fanfare in 81 and passed his tax cuts with a Democrat Congress, by the way. But it took 2 years before the turnaround really started happening. It took time for the economy to catch up to those big changes. I don't think it's going to take quite as long. There's a lot of headwind against Trump and anything he's going to do in terms of tax cuts and getting rid of regulation. You know, there's a lot of consequences still to be paid for the very bad economic policies of the last 4 years. And frankly, for the last year of the Trump administration. I mean, all the $10 trillion that got spent in COVID and the inflation. I mean, all of that stuff between Trump in 2020 and then Biden for 4 full years. There's a reckoning that has to happen. And so there's an economic reckoning that has to happen. The question is, can we do like what Reagan did in 81 and create such good policies that the pain is short-lived and the good result in the economy is so big that it overshadows that and kind of swallows up the negative. What I mean by that is that yes, inflation will probably continue because of the amount of money that they dumped on the market. And it's very likely that interest rates will not keep going down because they're going to try to keep the inflation under some limitation. So because of that, that's gonna hurt all of that pent up ambition and money that's ready to go into the market and housing to be built and businesses to be started and all of those things. It's gonna hurt that, but I don't think it's gonna stop it. I think it'll mitigate it a little bit. It'll limit it a little bit. It'll be a headwind economically. But the tailwind that we've got with the appetite of the people to just march forward and to take back political ground and to be dangerous out there economically in terms of, man, I'm going to go start a business. I'm going to do the risk and reward thing. I'm going to do that thing I was dreaming about, but I felt like, I don't know, the country's about to fall apart. Well, that's gone. Now everybody's got this optimism. So I think that tailwind in terms of attitude and appetite and the political winds being positive, I think that'll overcome that headwind of the consequences of all the bad policy of the last few years. And so I'm optimistic, folks. I know I'm a glass half full guy. I know I'm always trying to give you the optimism and the positive outlook. But for the bad and the ugly that's out there, the good outweighs it big time. So get ready for an amazing 2025. As I said on the program, I guess last week, we've got a lot of restoration to do. We're going to restore so many good things in this country, restoring our republic, restoring biblical citizenship, restoring a God consciousness. I mean, all those things I talked about last week, that's going to be a theme throughout 2025. So get ready. It's going to be a good year, folks. Have a great day. Look forward to being back with you on Thursday. Walker's with you tomorrow. You've been listening to At the Core with Walker Wildmon and Rick Green.
The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast may not necessarily reflect those of the American Family Association or American Family Radio.
Faith, family, freedom. American Family